dedicated baby eagle.
Expectations seem to be low for Sony's June 2022 PlayStation State of Play, as prior announcements seem to point toward an event focused largely on third-party games for the upcoming PlayStation VR2 headset. One of the few confirmed big titles ahead of the State of Play was Horizon Call of the Mountain. However, the actual livestream wound up including numerous high-profile reveals and gameplay trailers. In hindsight, studios like Capcom and Square Enix do make a focus on third-party support more enticing. With releases like Horizon Forbidden West in the rearview mirror, the June 2nd PlayStation Showcase establishes a bright future for both the PlayStation 4 and 5 well into 2023. It may even push some on the fence about PlayStation VR2 over the edge. Rumors about a remake of Capcom's acclaimed Resident Evil 4 have circulated for years, especially following remakes of Resident Evil 2 and 3 that hit stores in 2019 and 2020, respectively. The State of Play started off with a bang by confirming Resident Evil 4 will release for PlayStation 5 on March 24, 2023. I knew it since I heard the Spanish music at the beginning. It is indeed Resident Evil 4. Most of the trailer is cinematic, but at the end it does confirm that PlayStation VR2 content is also in development. In 2005, Capcom released Resident Evil 4 and completely changed the industry. Resident Evil 4 represented a major shift for the Resident Evil franchise, stands as one of the revolutionary games ever made, and inspired third-person shooter games for years to come. Capcom has re-released Resident Evil 4 a number of times over the years, remastering it for modern platforms and even creating a VR version for Oculus Quest 2. Now Capcom has officially announced a full-fledged Resident Evil 4 remake with a spooky trailer that has also confirmed its release date. The Resident Evil 4 remake trailer shows that the game is going for a darker tone than the original. While the original version of Resident Evil 4 still had horror elements, it was cheesy, even for Resident Evil standards, and had a more action-oriented approach. Based on what's shown in the Resident Evil 4 remake trailer, the new version of the game will be scarier, though we need to see more to be sure. The trailer shows Resident Evil 4 protagonist Leon S. Kennedy sent out to rescue the president's daughter, Ashley, who has gone missing in Europe. During his search, Leon winds up in a dangerous village populated by disturbed individuals who have been infected by Las Plagas. Leon will find himself at odds with these villagers and their leaders, with the trailer offering a brief look at who appears to be Baitors Mendez, also known as the Big Cheese. Besides Leon, Ashley, Osmond Sadler and Mendez, the Resident Evil 4 remake trailer offers fans a look at some of the other returning cast members. Notably, this includes Ada Wong, who starred in special side content in the original RE4. It will be interesting to see if Ada's role in the Resident Evil 4 remake. The Resident Evil 4 remake trailer confirms that some of the most memorable moments from the original game will be back in the remake, including the encounter on the lake, and the iconic village fight from the beginning of the game. During the reveal trailer for the remake of Resident Evil 4, there is a brief shot of a symbol on a concrete surface as blood dribbles down its surface. Considering how quickly the visual is on screen, it's easy to pass it off as another creepy image to help heighten the horror tone. However, upon closer investigation it becomes clear that this insignia is strikingly similar to one seen throughout the journey in Resident Evil Village. The insignia in question is of what appears to be a fetus, surrounded by a golden circle, which is placed in front of a set of sticks and wings sticking out the sides. This image serves as a recurring sight in Resident Evil Village, because it is the symbol of the cult group run by Mother Miranda. The more this symbol appears in the game, the more Ethan Winters associates it with feelings of terror, dread, and that something bad rests just around the corner. This now begs the question of how Mother Miranda's insignia could be retroactively worked into the plot of Resident Evil 4. For starters, Capcom has been clear that this is a reimagining of the original title, changing things around to complement an updated vision. It is also worth noting that since Resident Evil 4 takes place roughly 2 decades before Resident Evil Village, small cameos or Easter eggs can be sprinkled throughout to help it feel naturally connected to Resident Evil Village without it coming off as forced or distracting. Incorporating these narrative threads wouldn't even be that much of a stretch, as both Resident Evil 4 and Resident Evil Village already share many commonalities as it is. Both are thematically and stylistically similar, with areas like villages and castles making up a good portion of the action. Furthermore, the antagonist of Resident Evil 4, Sadler, is another power-hungry cult leader and could be reworked as the inspiration for Mother Miranda's devious schemes. It is also worth noting that the Las Plagas parasite of Resident Evil 4 functions similarly to the Caduo virus from Resident Evil Village. It could be suggested that the Las Plagas serves as a predecessor to the Caduo, and that Mother Miranda researched it and Sadler's methods before implementing her own as seen in the events of Resident Evil Village. Shortly after releasing the Resident Evil 4 Remake trailer, Capcom published some official screenshots of the game, giving fans a fresh look at some familiar locations. The Resident Evil Remake screenshots revealed by Capcom include protagonist Leon S. Kennedy sitting in a vehicle while traveling to the location in Spain where the president's daughter Ashley was last seen. In the screenshot, Leon is looking out the window and looks bored, mirroring the opening scene of the original Resident Evil 4. Another Resident Evil 4 Remake image shown by Capcom shows a bleak, muddy path that Leon will have to walk through as he conducts his investigation, and it reinforces the idea that the remake is clearly going for a darker, creepier vibe. The next image released by Capcom shows a house with a villager tending to a pot on the fire. The house is in a general state of disarray, and it appears to be the first house that Leon enters at the beginning of Resident Evil 4. If that's the case, then the villager shown in the image will try to kill Leon, resulting in the game's first enemy encounter. And finally, the last Resident Evil 4 Remake screenshot shared by Capcom shows the iconic village that players come across near the beginning of the game. This village is home to one of the most memorable scenes in all of Resident Evil 4, where a swarm of villagers attack and try to kill Leon. What follows is an action-packed battle where Leon has to defend himself from an onslaught of Las Plagas infected villagers, including one armed with a chainsaw. It will be interesting to see if the Resident Evil 4 Remake tweaks this scene at all to give returning players new surprises. The Resident Evil franchise is no stranger to virtual reality. When the original PlayStation VR released all the way back in 2016, one of its best experiences was a VR mode for Resident Evil 7. While most other PSVR launch titles were short and basic experiences, Resident Evil 7 along with Astro stood out from the crowd, allowing players to enjoy every second of the full game from within the headset. Just last year, Resident Evil 4 VR hit the Oculus Quest 2 store. For those with a Quest 2, the entire Resident Evil 4 experience was available in VR. While the game's core DNA was largely unchanged from the remastered PS4 and Xbox One versions of the game, with the same plot, mission structure, enemies, music, and visuals, the gameplay had been reworked from the ground up to create an innovative VR experience. So, based on the franchise's track record from the last few years, it makes sense that Resident Evil 4 Remake would have some form of VR content. Still, it's unclear what type of content that will turn out to be. One of the most likely outcomes is that this PSVR 2 content is an additional game mode that acts secondary to the main campaign, perhaps using the series Mercenaries mode as groundwork. This PSVR 2 exclusive content could offer a horde-like mode where players need to hold out in a variety of locations from the campaign. Alternatively, Resident Evil 4 Remake's PSVR 2 content could be a tad more ambitious, allowing players to experience the entire campaign in VR, just like Resident Evil 7 did, which I am hoping for. RE4 is launching in March next year, so it could be a launch title for PlayStation VR 2, as both release windows tends to be in correlation. Resident Evil is known for its earlier survival horror entries as much as it is known for its later action-driven entries. The benefit of Resident Evil having such a diverse catalog of genres in its franchise is that there is likely a single entry to complement anyone's preferences, whether they prefer one style of gameplay over another. Resident Evil 4 did not abandon the horror genre entirely, but it certainly absconds from it in fairly significant ways. For instance, Resident Evil 4 is much more tongue-in-cheek with its dialogue, and its rural European setting lays the foundation for some truly bizarre and surreal enemies. Leon S. Kennedy is a wisecracking, suave investigator, and almost every interaction with a primary antagonist features a corny one-liner. That is not to say Resident Evil 4 is devoid of horror. Some scenes can be particularly disturbing, but they are often followed by another sassy character interaction. Rather, Resident Evil 4's remake announcement teaser is dripping with the chilling tone and atmosphere players should expect from it, which from a visual standpoint is already much different from what fans may remember. There may still be corny quotes taken from the original that appear in the remake, but based on this teaser alone, it looks like Capcom wishes to plunge it wholly into survival horror. Its dark, atmospheric shots of Ganados and Zealots in candlelit corridors represent Resident Evil 4 in a much more eerie tone than before, and such a tonal shift will either be appreciated as an innovation or depreciated for how it strays from the original. Regardless, it is a remake after all, and such a monumental change certainly earns that definition. Further, Resident Evil 4 distanced itself slightly from the traditional survival horror fans knew in favor of a more action-oriented, arcade atmosphere. Tank controls are still a core part of the gameplay, but players have access to much more military-grade ballistics and have many more options in combat to rely upon, as well as close-quarters combat QTEs. In general, Resident Evil 4 is more melodramatic in a cheeky, corny sense. Still, players can feel the essence of survival horror when ammunition is low, and they are being pursued around a village while bottlenecking enemies and barricading themselves into tiny homes. This style of gameplay, however, is arguably outdated in terms of contemporary third-person action games. Even survival horror has transitioned away from tank controls to modern camera controls. Games such as Dead Space and The Evil Within deserve credit for that successful and popular segue. It is also arguably why the remakes for Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 3 are third-person shooters with modern camera controls. It only makes sense, then, that a remake of Resident Evil 4 follows the reimagined efforts of those titles, and that is clear from the teaser alone. The only thing fans need to see to confirm this is the fact that Leon sounds as if he is being voiced by the same actor, and the same character model from Resident Evil 2's remake is used as well. In the announcement teaser of Resident Evil 4's remake, Leon is much more pensive, as he was in Resident Evil 2's remake. By doing this, Capcom can create a salient narrative thread between Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 4, through both story and gameplay. The gameplay from Resident Evil 2's remake will likely be reprised with the same controls, but it will be interesting to see if any other mechanics are added. It is no secret that the remake of Resident Evil 3 was received unfavorably, which is disappointing because Resident Evil 3 Nemesis is one of the most iconic titles in Resident Evil history. Upon its announcement, fans were elated to see Nemesis after how profoundly impactful Mr. X was for the remake of Resident Evil 2. However, after learning how much influential content had been cut in the remake's iteration, such as the entire clock tower sequence, fans were understandably upset. This remake was compared to DLC for the remake of Resident Evil 2 and not its own title due to its underwhelming length and scope, while some fans appreciated it for the moments it did have against Nemesis and for its modern interpretation of Jill Valentine. Still, Resident Evil 4's remake cannot afford to undercut its content and offer players only half of the game it is retelling. Nearly every sequence in Resident Evil 4 is memorable for one reason or another, and fans will undoubtedly feel shortchanged if any of their favorite moments are disregarded. The remake teaser shows that new sequences will be added, as should be expected, with a redesigned Ashley Graham. This will help to perpetuate its new emphasis on horror, but new scenes will hopefully not overwrite that of important sequences unless the sequences they overwrite fail to fit the remake's tone. Such choices will always have either a positive or negative impact on dedicated fans, but the remake is more than likely going to take these tonal risks in order to present something new to fans of the original Resident Evil 4. You all know I love the Resident Evil universe, and this is definitely a day one, and I'm curious to see how it relates to other entries and lead up to the sequel.
The pain. Even for a second. This time, it can be different. It has to.
Resident Evil fans had high expectations for PlayStation State of Play for June 2022, and Capcom has delivered. The show started off with the announcement of a remake for Resident Evil 4, but that wasn't it for Resident Evil's announcements. Capcom also revealed that 2021's hugely popular Resident Evil Village would be coming to a new platform, virtual reality. Resident Evil Village is officially in development for release via the PS5's upcoming PSVR 2 headset. Capcom made the announcement with a short 90-second trailer during Thursday's State of Play presentation. The trailer focused entirely on first-person virtual reality gameplay, giving Resident Evil fans a close look at what Resident Evil Village will look like on PSVR 2. The good news is that it looks just as high quality as Resident Evil Village already does on modern platforms. The trailer for Resident Evil Village VR on PS5 focused entirely on a single section of the game, that being the popular Castle Dimitrescu region. That means players got an excellent look at Lady Dimitrescu and her up-close and personal interactions, including her intimately drinking blood from Ethan's wrist. Lady Dimitrescu's daughters are also heavily featured in the trailer, hinting at the intense encounters players will face with each of them. Capcom states it plans to use the PSVR 2 headset's 4K HDR display, eye tracking, and 3D audio to their fullest. Resident Evil Village VR will also require the use of the PSVR 2 Sense controllers for tracking hand movements in-game. While initial details are limited, Resident Evil fans can perhaps look back to previous Capcom VR releases for insight into plans for Resident Evil Village VR. Resident Evil 7, for example, was fully released on VR and absolutely terrifying, at that. As such, expectations will be high for Resident Evil Village VR.
Oh, careful what you wish for, Ethan Winters.
What are you doing?
Released on PC and PlayStation 4 in 2020, The Walking Dead Saints and Sinners was an ambitious VR title that brought players into the gorgeously grotesque universe of The Walking Dead. During an era in which many virtual reality titles came across as either demos or early demonstrations of a concept in need of fleshing out, The Walking Dead Saints and Sinners stood as a feature-complete and fully realized game that made the most of what VR technology had to offer. Now, as mentioned during PlayStation's June 2022 State of Play stream, it will be getting a sequel in the form of The Walking Dead Saints and Sinners Retribution. The minute-long trailer established that the same quality stealth combat experience from the original will return in the sequel. Much of the gameplay shown involves slinking through hallways with a flashlight or surreptitiously sneaking up behind the undead while brandishing a knife. When information about the title first cropped up in early 2022, minor criticism was leveled at what looked to be a retread of the first The Walking Dead VR outing. However, as the Chapter 2 subheading implies, this is more of a new section of a larger experience rather than a genuine sequel. Sony dedicated a not insignificant amount of time to VR during its June State of Play stream, indicating that VR will be an important part of the PlayStation 5 gaming library in the future. A good bit of info about the PSVR 2 has already been made public, though a definite release date has yet to be announced. Some believe it could still launch during the holiday season of 2022, though a 2023 release window is more likely. In much the same way No Man's Sky takes players on a journey, the developers at Hello Games have undertaken quite the expedition in updating the game over the years. In the time following its release in 2016, the procedurally generated worlds of the title have seen significant and often positive changes. In addition to adding new content and features for players, the developer previously brought the No Man's Sky experience to virtual reality devices in 2019. Recently, it was revealed that VR support for the game was coming to another headset as well. During the PlayStation State of Play, Hello Games shared a roughly 50-second trailer for No Man's Sky. In the brief video, the developer revealed that VR support for No Man's Sky was coming to PlayStation VR 2 following the launch of the virtual reality headset in the coming months. During the short video, fans received a look at the gameplay. Some scenes captured during the trailer included a player piloting a spacecraft near a space station, along with several action shots, including a battle with Sentinels. There was even a giant space bug shown. In addition to the trailer, Sean Murray, the founder of Hello Games, provided several other details about the upcoming version of No Man's Sky. According to the developer, the improvements in technology over the past couple of years have allowed the studio to take player immersion to a whole new level. Beyond this, he noted that the new Sense controller would aid in the believability of the experience. This is likely exciting news for many No Man's Sky fans looking for even more exciting ways to play the game.
There. Where are you taking me? I asked you a question. Everyone says Reyes is a good shot.
Horizon Call of the Mountain got its first gameplay trailer during Sony's State of Play June livestream, the last of 4 PlayStation VR 2 game trailers during the official lead-off event of this year's Summer Games Fest. The trailer offered a deep look at what to expect from the VR tie-in game to the Horizon franchise and the PlayStation VR 2 experience. The protagonist of the game is Reyes, a former Shadow Karja warrior that was being held prisoner and has been tasked to investigate a machine threat to the Karja. Reyes was chosen for his climbing and archery skills, and completing this mission will grant him redemption in the ways of the Sundom. The PlayStation blog post also stated that the story will feature new and familiar characters from the Horizon universe and teased a possible cameo or interaction with Aloy. The gameplay featured climbing, swimming, and machine combat with small machines like the Watcher, flying machines, and the renowned Thunderjaw. The trailer was captured on PlayStation 5 hardware, and the visuals that Guerrilla Games is known for come through beautifully, even as the true VR experience could end up making this trailer look pale in comparison to when the device releases. The virtual representation of the user's hands looks smoother and more deliberate than on VR1. There's a sense of tension while drawing the bow and visual reverberation of the string after a shot. The detail of the Karja armor around the player character's hands has a sense of texture that makes it look like the player can feel every wrinkle, metal adornment, and loose strap. The trailer gives nothing away in terms of when in the Horizon story this adventure takes place. At first glance, the involvement of a captive Shadow Karja warrior places it within a few years in either direction of the main story. With the PlayStation blog post mentioning Aloy making an appearance, that has to put Call of the Mountain sometime around her arrival in Karja territory and the Battle of Meridian at the end of Horizon Zero Dawn. There will be a separate section of the game called River Rides that offers a different experience of cruising down the river and spectating the scenery and machines. Guerrilla's trademark stunning visuals in partnership with Firesprite's pedigree for VR experiences have set Horizon Call of the Mountain up to be a foundational experience for PlayStation VR 2 titles. The world of Horizon is beautiful, and half the fun comes from just exploring it. There are varied locations to explore in the 2 games that have been released, and players can find themselves braving freezing mountaintops one moment and sneaking through a dense rainforest the next. In Horizon Forbidden West, Aloy has a grappling hook that helps her scale mountains, and a diving mask to swim into gorgeous underwater caverns. Fast travel is available, but there is hardly a reason to use it when the environments are so captivating. There are plenty of animals to see, but most players will be far more mesmerized by the machines. In Horizon Zero Dawn, many of the machines are based on dinosaurs, hence why players see titans such as the Thunderjaws, which resemble T-Rexes, the Tallnecks, which look like Brontosauruses, and the Watchers, which look like small theropods. With Horizon Forbidden West, the catalog of machines is greatly expanded, and the designs take inspiration from a wide range of animals. For example, the Slitherfangs look like robotic cobras, the Clamberjaws resemble monkeys, and the Leaplashers look like kangaroos. If Horizon Call of the Mountain was merely about exploring the wilderness and discovering new machines and biomes, it would already have the potential to be a great game that shows off the power of PSVR 2. However, with combat, the game goes one step further and ensures that it is more than just a virtual safari trip. Horizon's enemies are pretty unique and, consequently, it takes a unique kind of combat to take them down. Machines are huge, and Aloy is tiny compared to them, so brute strength simply will not work. Fortunately, the machines are quite modular, and if Aloy is smart, she can chip away at the machines and knock off their components little by little. For more advanced players, it is possible to knock off a machine's weapon and use it against it. Selecting the right weapon is crucial because different types of machines have different strengths and weaknesses. Horizon's unique combat is back in Horizon Call of the Mountain, and players will get to experience it in VR. Currently, Rias has only been shown operating a bow, but it already opens up plenty of options for combat. Immersed in the world of VR, every arrow will feel many times more impactful, and every encounter with machines will be even more terrifying. The Horizon series is notable for having an interesting range of weapons that are as fun to use as they are effective. Aloy starts with a simple spear, and she soon gains a bow that allows her to engage in ranged combat. If players prefer stealth, they can use a tripcaster to lay down dangerous wires in the path of enemies. Horizon Forbidden West's weapons are greatly expanded and include shredder gauntlets which shoot discs that Aloy can catch and throw again, as well as spike throwers which let Aloy chuck deadly javelins. With combat confirmed in Horizon Call of the Mountain, players will get to experience bow combat in VR, which is sure to make every draw of the bowstring feel more real than ever. The inclusion of combat also opens the opportunity for Rias to discover and use new weapons. Guerrilla Games has proven that it is capable of great creativity when it comes to weapon design, so there is no telling what the studio could surprise gamers with. Horizon Call of the Mountain's weapons will also be an opportunity to test out PSVR 2's controllers and their innovative features. As has been revealed, the controllers will have many of the same features as the DualSense, including haptic feedback and adaptive triggers, and it is easy to imagine how these will be implemented to allow players to feel the tension of the bowstring. The controllers will also feature finger touch detection, allowing the headset to know where the player has their hands placed even when they are not pressing any buttons. If bow combat is implemented correctly, Horizon Call of the Mountain could be the best game to show players just what PSVR 2 is capable of. Horizon Call of the Mountain is among a few games which have been confirmed for PSVR 2, and other titles include Among Us, Samurai Slaughterhouse, Resident Evil Village, and Pavlov. Guerrilla Games' title is likely to be a flagship game for the headset, and trailers reveal that it will be a visual treat filled with many exciting moments. The inclusion of bow combat proves Guerrilla Games has not skimped out on its VR offering, and it will be just as fleshed out as its console counterparts.
It is time to climb into the light.
Guerrilla Games have let a few weeks pass since its last patch update for Horizon Forbidden West. With some key post-game features still missing months after launch, some fans began questioning what was going on over at the studio. Those questions have now been answered as Sony decided to package one of Horizon Forbidden West's biggest patch updates with a new trailer for Sony's upcoming spin-off PSVR 2 game, Horizon Call of the Mountain. After the first gameplay reveal trailer for the PSVR 2 exclusive Horizon Call of the Mountain, narrative director Ben McCaw announced that Horizon Forbidden West will be getting a major update that will finally be bringing many appealing new features to the game and a fan-favorite game mode, New Game Plus. Now players can replay the main story with all the upgraded weapons and armor and fight harder enemies. The 1.14 patch, dubbed a major update for Horizon Forbidden West, will also bring in the ultra-hard difficulty, the ability to reset an entire skill tree to retool Aloy's skills, and new weapons and rewards, like face paints and dyes for New Game Plus. In addition, there is a new trophy set, like the God of War Easter egg trophies, along with finally the ability to transmog or take the look of a favorite armor set and apply it to a piece of armor with resistance and perks that the player prefers. With no chapter select option to redo specific events from the adventure, fans have to start a new game in order to relive Horizon Forbidden West story and access certain parts of the map for missing lore logs. Players would prefer having the weapons that they've spent 100 hours or more upgrading and becoming familiar with specific weapons and upgraded ammo types. New Game Plus offers players the chance to have their favorite weapons throughout the game, skipping the grind to get favorite weapons and upgrading them. There were other inclusions in this patch, which include a 1.15 hotfix patch, a patch that makes a missing audio log available, and a host of patches for main quest, side quest, and rebel activities. There was also a fix for certain machine interactions in Forbidden West, including a glitch that made machine parts fall through the map and become unreachable to the player to pick up. The Quen Imperial Guard also had an issue where their armor was stronger than other humanoid enemies, and Guerrilla has brought their armor stats more in line with other humanoid enemies. Included in Horizon Forbidden West's NG Plus mode is a currency called Champion Tokens that is rewarded to players as they complete main quests, side quests, errands, tallnecks, rebel camps, and other activities. While the number of tokens varies across different tasks, the amount matches total skill points allotted to that activity on a regular playthrough. Players can still accumulate skill points in NG+, but once the cap is reached, they instead earn ghost levels that build through XP and allow hunters to track their progress further. The champion tokens are used to purchase new legendary weapons, dyes, and face paints. Champion tokens are relegated to NG+ only, and there are over 100 tokens to collect, with 8 legendary weapons costing 10 apiece, as well as 5 face paints and 4 dyes that cost 5 each. While the tokens are rewarded for main quest missions, they are not rewarded for the tutorial missions. Reach for the stars and interlude, the point of the lance. When players start their NG+ run, they are presented with the option to skip tutorial missions altogether, beginning with Aloy leaving Meridian and heading to Chain Scrape. The cosmetic option of face paint was introduced in Horizon Zero Dawn. However, these paints were only obtainable by completing different difficulties in NG+ mode, with Ultra Hard unlocking all of them in one go. In Horizon Forbidden West, as Aloy makes her way into Tunic territory, the option to apply facial paint becomes accessible through painters at 3 Tunic settlements such as Scalding Spear, the Bulwark, and Thornmarsh. This mirrors the Tunic culture of using ink to record stories on their bodies, and coincides with the new option to dye Aloy's outfits. Throughout Horizon Forbidden West, every tribe has face paints awarded by completing quests, unlocking Valor Surges, or discovering war totems. The only exception was the Quen, a more advanced tribe from across the water with access to outdated focuses who settled at Landfall, located in the ruins of modern-day San Francisco. With NG+, the Quen tribe gets its own set of face paints for Aloy to wear, although there still aren't any Quen outfits. The new face paints cost 5 champion tokens and are called Quen Officer, Quen Imperial, Quen Relic Hunter, Quen Navigator, and Quen Lightweaver. The option to collect plants for different dyes was introduced in Forbidden West, presenting players with a variety of sharp colors to apply to Aloy's outfits. Unlocked and purchased through trading bloom plants and metal shards, Aloy must present herself to a dyer within different settlements to change her outfit's colors. Dyes in Horizon Forbidden West are organized by tribe, and can only be applied to outfits from that specific tribe. In NG+, new dye sets no longer require metal shards or blooms. Instead, champion tokens are used, and each dye costs 5 champion tokens apiece, with the Osram and Quen tribes not included. Legendary weapons were a new tier in Horizon Forbidden West, ranking above Purple's Very Rare. Armed with 3 different ammo types, legendary weapons are either bought with arena medals or awarded as payment for completing several quests and activities. Each legendary weapon can be upgraded 5 times, requiring scarce and specific items from more advanced machines and their Apex variants. However, Aloy becomes a master hunter armed with these powerful tools, nearly unstoppable as she progresses through the story. NG+ will undoubtedly change that with the introduction of ultra-hard difficulty, although legendary weapons will still provide a boost for Aloy to continue on her way. Unlike Zero Dawn's NG+, which saw the same named weapons appear only with an Adept title and additional mod slot, Horizon Forbidden West's NG+ introduces 8 completely unique legendary weapons, which require 10 champion tokens each. With NG+, Aloy's adventures throughout the western and southwestern United States can challenge her to ultra-hard difficulty, unlocking new rewards such as trophies, legendary weapons, dyes, and paints, all while experiencing enhanced graphics and quality-of-life fixes. With the ability to carry over gear, stats, and skills, running through the world of Horizon will remind players of its lush and deadly landscape where they must become master hunters to survive. PlayStation has been actively porting its biggest PS4 games like God of War 2018 to PC, and Insomniac Games' Marvel's Spider-Man Remastered and Miles Morales is the latest example. An announcement trailer during State of Play confirms it will release on August 12, 2022, for both Steam and Epic Games Store, and Miles Morales will be releasing this fall. I will talk about the PC strategy of PlayStation in the gaming segment report of Sony in another video. When Sony unveiled the PlayStation 5 at its Future of Gaming event in 2020, one of the very first games that it revealed alongside the new console was a stunning indie game called Stray, where players take on the role of an orange cat. Stray immediately caught the gamers' and internet's attention, with many intrigued by the concept of a video game with cyberpunk aesthetics where the main character is a cat. And now the long wait to play Stray is nearly at an end. Stray was featured at the latest PlayStation State of Play event, where fans were treated to a gorgeous gameplay trailer showing off the game's environments, exploration, and more. The trailer concluded by confirming that Stray's release date is July 19th, at which point it will be available across PC, PS4, and PS5. It was also confirmed that those who were signed up for the more expensive PlayStation Plus tiers will be able to play it on day one at no extra charge. Stray is going to be available day one to anyone that's signed up for PS Plus Extra or PS Plus Premium. One of the big surprises for the State of Play was possibly the unveiling of the Callisto Protocol, the Dead Space spiritual successor made by the co-creator of Dead Space, Glenn Schofield. The Callisto Protocol wasn't expected during the State of Play, but it certainly impressed. A new trailer debuted the Callisto Protocol's gameplay while also confirming the horror game would be released later this year. The Callisto Protocol State of Play trailer featured a mix of gameplay and in-game cinematics, offering a first look at what it will look like to play the horror game. Dead Space fans will be pleased to see that the Callisto Protocol features plenty of dark, winding corridors with monstrous enemies waiting behind every turn. It's properly nightmarish. In the trailer, several enemy types can be seen that are certain to haunt some players' dreams. There are human prisoners, what appears to be a gun-wielding security robot, humans that have been transformed into monsters, smaller fleshy monsters that fire tendrils, and something worse. The trailer ends with a humanoid monster breaking away from a wall. It seems sightless, making clicking noises to find its prey. Odds are, these are just a few of the monsters awaiting players in the Callisto Protocol. Players won't be without a means of fighting back, of course. The Callisto Protocol's new trailer shows the player facing down enemies in incredibly diverse and gory ways. Melee weapons like bats, pipes, knives, and even the player's boot are shown taking down foes. The player is also shown with a slow-firing pistol, too, which is reliable at range but not so much up close. There are also environmental weapons, like doors that can be slammed on enemies or industrial machinery that enemies can be pushed into. Suffice to say, the moon of Callisto will prove to be a perfect location for a survival horror game, and protagonist Jacob Lee seems perfect for the role of survivor. An outbreak is transforming people into something called the biophage, and it's clearly not a simple transformation. These monsters are creatively transformed into perfect nightmares. Horror fans won't have to wait too much longer to experience the Callisto Protocol for themselves either. Developer Striking Distance Studios confirmed that the Callisto Protocol will be launching this year, on December 2nd to be specific. Because the highly anticipated Dead Space remake arrives in January, only 1 month after the Callisto Protocol, it will be exciting to see fans' reactions to both in such a short period. The Callisto Protocol will hopefully create a mold that feels fresh enough to warrant its own franchise as popular as Dead Space. Meanwhile, Dead Space's remake reminds fans of what made the original so special in the first place. The best-case scenario would be that both titles are hugely successful, meaning that the Callisto Protocol can pave its own path while Dead Space continues to receive new installments in the future. The Callisto Protocol may be evidence that a survival horror science fiction title does not need the Dead Space label to make itself popular, but Schofield's influence may be what helps the game maintain elements that fans adore about Dead Space. The horrors of mutilated corpses overwhelming players who have only a few makeshift armaments is long overdue in games. The resurgence in this genre later this year and early next year may see a renewal for Dead Space, and if successful, the Callisto Protocol can further expand upon Dead Space in a meaningful and unique way. PlayStation's June 2, 2022 State of Play stream brought with it many major announcements and reveals. Among the most exciting is perhaps Roll 7 and Private Division's Rollerdrome, a title that melds the mayhem of a Tony Hawk game with the chaos of a fast-paced third-person shooter. The roughly minute-long Rollerdrome reveal trailer shows off a stark comic book aesthetic that brings to mind titles like the 2019 Humble Bundle published hit Void Bastards or, more aptly, the cult classic Sega Dreamcast game Jet Set Radio. Mixing the frenetic flow of roller skating with shooting that appears to require dead-eye accuracy, Rollerdrome will be a standout on PlayStation platforms. Developed by the team behind the skateboarding-themed OlliOlli games, Rollerdrome is poised for a mid-August release, meaning that fans won't have to wait more than a few months to get their hands on it. Slated to debut on both PS4 and PS5, the game is technically a Sony exclusive on console, though it will also be available on PC. What's more, Rollerdrome will seemingly be a timed exclusive for at least 6 months. Some fine print in the trailer's closing moments indicates that Xbox Series X and Nintendo Switch ports could come around after mid-February of next year. Private Division is a subsidiary of Take-Two, the publisher of the similarly stylistic Borderlands series, which focuses on the publication of indie titles. In 2020, Private Division acquired 3 prominent indie studios, bringing Roll7 into the fold alongside Ori and the Blind Forest developer Moon Games and Armello developer League of Geeks. These acquisitions serve as an indication of how far indie gaming has come over the past decade. In the early 2010s, Roll7 was self-publishing overlooked games like Zombie Pop and Gets to the Exit. Today, the studio is working with major publishers on console-exclusive titles. Coincidentally, fans of the odd niche of gaming Rollerdrome occupies may have more to look forward to in 2022. While nothing is set in stone, Sega is reportedly working on new entries in the Crazy Taxi and Jet Set Radio series, meaning that roller skating-centric titles could swiftly become the next major trend in indie gaming. Rollerdrome is set in the year 2030 in a retro-futuristic world that is perfectly accompanied by the game's cel-shaded art style and synthesizer-heavy soundtrack, giving off strong Hotline Miami vibes. Players take control of Kara Hassan, a roller skater participating in a competition of elimination within this dystopian world. There are a whole slew of different enemies, weapons, and environments that the player must navigate in order to win the competition of Rollerdrome. The trailer has shown a variety of different enemy types that seem to each have their own unique abilities and require different tactics and weapons to take down. While the maps range from snowy mountaintops to desert canyons and industrial complexes, each area looks to have different environmental characteristics that are sure to affect the gameplay. It is easy to see a connection between Rollerdrome and games like Tony Hawk Pro Skater. The movement seems fast-paced and fluid, allowing players to gain speed to perform stunts, but also features a bullet time effect in order to achieve stylized kills. And similar to Tony Hawk Pro Skater, players must complete challenges within each stage, utilizing their skills and the environment to successfully access hard-to-reach areas and perform tricks. Developer Roll7 has experience in roller sports with the recent game OlliOlli World. Like Rollerdrome, this game has players seamlessly riding a skateboard over different environments. This new entry has players trade in the skateboard for a pair of roller skates and also adds a third-person shooter element, but it appears that Roll7 has a knack for creating movement-based gameplay. In addition to adapting the flow of OlliOlli World, some of Roll7's lesser-known games have definitely laid some groundwork for their new title. Laser League was released in 2018 and is described as a combination between Rocket League and Tron. It is clear to see that this multiplayer arena brawler relies on quick reflexes and well-timed moves for players to come out victorious. The developer is familiar with fast-paced shooters as well. One of Roll7's first titles is Not a Hero, a 2D action shooter that required skill and patience to complete each level. And similar to its other games, Not a Hero is all about quick movement and twitch reflexes, and both mechanics will surely play a role in Rollerdrome as well. While the inspiration from arcade skateboarders and previous titles is clear, there are plenty of other games that Rollerdrome seems reminiscent of. My Friend Pedro is a shoot-'em-up game from developer Dead Toast Entertainment and published by Devolver Digital that featured a lot of interesting gameplay mechanics, and its influence can be seen in Rollerdrome as well. In My Friend Pedro, players would perform different acrobatic stunts including dives, rolls, and the utilization of slow-motion skill in order to navigate each level and eliminate enemies. The goal was to complete the level as quickly and as flawlessly as possible. Fans of this indie hit should be able to see how it inspired Rollerdrome since the trailer featured many different moves and stunts that showed the player dodging attacks or performing tricks with flair while also eliminating enemies. Roll7 has created a unique combination with Rollerdrome, one that is sure to appease fans of many genres. The fast-paced gameplay seems like a perfect synergy between high-octane stunts and over-the-top third-person combat, ensuring that the indie title is one to keep an eye on. Eternights was formally revealed as part of the June 2022 State of Play with a promising trailer showcasing many of the game's unique features. It sees players having to make their way through a post-apocalyptic world that sees the majority of the population turned into monsters, as the remaining group ends up with special powers. The game has a rather interesting direction behind it, as it serves as a real-time action RPG with dating sim elements behind some game-changing choices. The title is being developed by a small indie studio known as Studio Psy. Eternights is its first release, coming to PS4, PS5, and PC next year. The indie game has been in development for at least 2 years, and fans can watch Eternights' development over the years through Studio Psy's YouTube account, as well as its Twitter. Despite the game's humble beginnings, Eternights was given a rather impressive reveal trailer as part of the recent State of Play. The trailer does a great job at showcasing what the game is about, as it not only shows real-time hack-and-slash battles, but also the special images and events players will discover as they date the game's characters. While things are unclear on which characters are dateable right now, some of the girls are options. It most definitely comes off as a rather interesting game, as it features almost everything from a motorcycle chase sequence to a calendar system teasing players with a time limit of what they can accomplish each day, not unlike Persona 5. The reveal even hints at potential party mechanics that may be unlocked as fans bond and date the characters found in the game. The calendar system is not the only thing that Eternights has taken inspiration from the Persona series for, however, as the developers have made it rather clear that Eternights is a Persona-inspired action game. However, unlike its inspiration, it aims to go all in with dating sim mechanics, as even in-game animated cutscenes will change depending on who players date. Something that many fans have to look forward to in regards to the game's dating aspects is that players won't need to feel restricted to dating the girls as they play. Eternights features a character known as Johan, who has been explicitly mentioned to be one of the LGBT relationships players can encounter in the game. For fans who wish to see more, they should keep an eye on Studio Psy's official channels. The Street Fighter franchise has been Capcom's leading fighting game series for decades now, and although there was a brief teaser trailer earlier this year for Street Fighter VI, the trailer shown during today's State of Play had a lot more details for fans to sink their teeth into, such as a release window and 2 new modes. The trailer for Street Fighter VI shows off one of the first known newcomers, Jamie, donning a blue sleeveless hoodie and beating on a punching bag at a gym. Then, fans got to see different areas of Metro City, the fictional metropolis where Street Fighter VI takes place. It turns out that players will be able to actually run around and take on battles in what appears to be an open-world mode called World Tour, a first for the series. It'll be an immersive single-player story experience. Battle Hub is another new mode that Capcom didn't show much of. Essentially, it will allow players to connect online with others in new ways, further expanding the scope of player communication and engagement. The rest of the trailer pretty much just shows Chun-Li, Ryu, and some other fighters taking part in some high-octane matches. Also, it appears that Capcom has listened to the feedback from the community regarding Street Fighter VI's controversial logo and has redesigned it. For those interested, Capcom also released another trailer for Street Fighter VI after the State of Play that highlighted a neat feature coming to the game. For the first time in the series, Street Fighter VI will have real-time commentary from well-known talent in the fighting game community, adding more excitement to each match. Subtitles will be supported in 13 languages, however, there's no word on whether the feature will be able to be toggled on and off. Fans should expect an option once the game launches next year. Back in February, when Street Fighter VI was first announced, just 2 characters were confirmed for the roster, Ryu and Luke. While Ryu is the quintessential Street Fighter character, appearing in every single Street Fighter game since 1987, Luke is not regarded with quite as much adoration. First introduced in the maligned last entry in the franchise, Street Fighter V, Luke appeared as the final DLC character in the game's 5th season pass, and was thus the last character to come to the game overall. From a gameplay perspective, Luke uses a form of military-taught MMA. His moveset consists primarily of wild, stiff blows, throws, and an ability to launch sand in the opponent's face. Story-wise, Luke is a former Special Forces operative who decided to leave the military to pursue a career in competitive fighting. Luke's place as the final DLC fighter for Street Fighter V, along with his juxtaposing arrogance and naivety, have led him to being one of the most disliked fighters in recent years. But for some reason, he's making a return in Street Fighter VI, and in a big way, being one of the top-built characters right now right alongside the immensely popular, recognizable Ryu. Both Ryu and Luke can be seen throughout the new trailer, with Luke punching away at a bag while Ryu gracefully spins around a wooden deck testing out his new GI. This new trailer also confirmed that Chun-Li is returning once again to the franchise. First appearing in Street Fighter II in 1991, Chun-Li is widely considered to be one of the first female video game protagonists, or at least the first to get any real mainstream recognition. Since 1991, Chun-Li has been another staple of the franchise, right alongside Ryu and Ken. In the trailer, Chun-Li looks to be a little older than her usual depictions, perhaps suggesting that she might take on a mentor role in Street Fighter VI. This is backed up by the footage in the trailer showing her sparring with a younger woman, playfully flipping behind her and delivering a subtle tap to her head with her foot. This student could be a new character for Street Fighter VI's roster, but that hasn't been confirmed just yet. Along with Chun-Li, Ryu, and Luke, one new fighter was also revealed during this State of Play trailer. Named Jamie, this character uses his own unique style of martial arts, based on a form of drunken boxing. Jamie has a variety of moves that involve attacks inspired by breakdancing, such as the multi-kick spin he does in the trailer while balancing on his head. While these characters were officially revealed in the recent trailer, concept art of the game was leaked shortly afterwards that showed the rest of the cast. This Street Fighter VI's concept art revealed a total of 22 different characters, a mix of new and old faces that fans could recognize. This includes redesigns for the original 8 from Street Fighter II and characters from more recent games like Street Fighter V. This leaked roster spread across the internet like wildfire, with some images on Twitter having been removed due to a copyright report, likely at Capcom's behest. The leaks were further acknowledged by a tweet on the Street Fighter VI account in a rather tongue-in-cheek fashion. The tweet notes that many fans have seen the images of Street Fighter VI's potential roster, acknowledging this news was shown way earlier than intended. Despite this, the community's positive reactions to the leaked designs were appreciated by the team, and they hope that despite the secret being out at this point, the fans will still look forward to the official reveals later on. While the tweet didn't directly address the leak, it did touch on its contents and the praise for them. Some fans are theorizing that the leaker was from Capcom itself, and this was a move to drum up more hype and suspense for Street Fighter VI. Others found the statement rather refreshing, as the company acknowledged something was shown earlier than intended, and instead of trying to pretend it didn't happen, it spun into something positive. Nakayama commented on Ryu's new design for Street Fighter VI, which is a similar design to Ryu's bearded alternate costume in Street Fighter V. The game director confirms Street Fighter VI takes place after the events of Street Fighter III Third Strike. Although some time passed since Street Fighter III Third Strike, Ryu feels he's not there yet. He wears a kasaya, a Buddhist robe, which is reminiscent of his martial arts master Goken. Goken is the older brother of Street Fighter series antagonist and master of the Satsui no Heido, Akuma. Ryu believes he still has a lot of life lessons to learn, and his Buddhist monk-inspired design in Street Fighter VI conveys that idea. Within the timeline of Street Fighter VI is the latest entry with new ground to explore. For over 20 years, Street Fighter III Third Strike was regarded as the endpoint of the current Street Fighter canon. Ryu will rise and meet the challenges a new threat presents in Street Fighter VI. Ryu's bearded design is already beloved by many fighting game fans across social media. Additionally, many are praising Capcom for finally taking the story forward after the ending of Street Fighter III Third Strike. His new design leads to confusion about who gave Ryu the robe and where he has been since the end of Street Fighter III Third Strike. However, answers to fan questions about Ryu will likely arrive in Street Fighter VI next year. One of these is Street Fighter VI's new gameplay features, which is known as the drive system according to the post. This new system will allow for experimentation, with 5 different techniques that can be utilized when the drive gauge is filled. These can be used to enhance a player's offensive or defensive options, which include a parry that can repel an attack that refills their own gauge, or an overdrive art which is similar to EX special moves from past Street Fighters. Alongside these new techniques is a new way for players to learn the mechanics of Street Fighter VI. This includes a classic and modern control scheme available for gamers to try. The classic control scheme retains the 6-button layout that most veteran fans expect, with the same fighting game inputs from past games. The new modern control scheme allows for easier inputs, with one button being dedicated to the special moves, and different directional inputs allowing for specials to be used. The post notes that this control type is perfect for new players or those who struggle with classic command inputs from previous Street Fighter games. The final note left for fans on this blog post are the 2 new modes that were showcased in Street Fighter VI's trailer, World Tour and Battle Hub. World Tour is described as the game's single-player mode, where players will use an avatar character to explore the world of Metro City. The Battle Hub, on the other hand, is promised to be a place that will feature more than just online matches, with more details about both of these modes going to be revealed in the future. Having wowed PC and Xbox players earlier this year, Sony's State of Play event provided a glimpse into the future of Tunic. It's now been revealed that the indie sensation will be making its way to PS4 and PS5 on September 27th. With a proven track record already behind it, there are plenty of reasons why PlayStation owners should jump on Tunic when it lands at their site in a few months' time. Season A Letter to the Future was originally revealed in 2020 during that year's The Game Awards presentation. The Strange Adventure Games announcement trailer introduced audiences to a young woman riding her bike through beautiful environments, cataloging cultures in the moments before calamity. Her letter to the future journaling a final season seemed as touching as it did tragic, but left interested indie game fans curious for more. The new trailer for Season A Letter to the Future provides a similar but more in-depth look at what's previously been shown. It's a more intimate look at the game's protagonist and the work she's doing, including audio recordings, photographs, drawings, and interviews. There are also a significant number of new environments and new characters briefly teased in the trailer. Perhaps the most interesting aspect of the trailer is the pervasive melancholy despite all the smiling faces and beautiful environments. Also confirmed alongside the new Season A Letter to the Future trailer is that the game will be arriving later this year. Autumn is the current release window, which is unfortunately unspecific, but it's better than what interested gamers had before. Season A Letter to the Future will also now be released on PlayStation 4 in addition to PlayStation 5 and PC, broadening the game's potential audience. It's said that a picture is worth 1,000 words, and evidently, this seems to be the mantra Season is approaching players with as it sets the stage for a world full of characters with rich stories to tell and mysterious areas to explore. 2 core mechanics have been demonstrated in the latest State of Play showcase, one providing a glimpse at how the player can take snapshots of everything and anything, and the other a microphone ready to capture any sounds, voices, or music the player might want to record. Season appears to present an ethos of immortalizing the finite, as the trailer goes on to provide an enigmatic introduction to a community of places and people that shall all be mysteriously gone within a season, hence the game's title. But this isn't a new concept, as recent games such as Toem and Paparazzi incorporate the mechanic of photography into their game design. While Paparazzi takes a more candid, camp tone that feels more like a collectathon than exploration and experimentation, Toem in particular is the best comparison to the upcoming season. It, too, takes the player on an adventure through a stylized world full of interesting characters and locations with the player being freely able to take photos of anything they'd like. TOEM differs, though, as it sets the player on a self-serving journey across the game's world, completing quests along the way and presenting an untold narrative to the player for them to discover. Season appears to be promising an altogether more sophisticated, grander experience, all lensed through the player's personal experience with the game and how they choose to play. With rich color and an additional depth of sound and dynamic interactions, Season is elevating the photography gameplay experiences offered in previous games. From the current trailers provided and the aforementioned mysterious cataclysm that draws near to the end of the season, it feels like it has a bittersweet but utterly fantastical tale to tell. Even the game's subtitle, A Letter to the Future, promises an air of mystery. Whether the game will lean more on its characters or its locations, the stories told or the stories uncovered, all will remain to be seen with the game's official release. But 2022 is promising to bring a diverse range of games that are treading new waters to deliver unique playing experiences, from Stray to Season A Letter to the Future.
Is it going? Is it gone?
Not yet.
If Resident Evil first started off the state of play with a bang, Square Enix's Final Fantasy XVI ended it on a similarly strong note. Square Enix first revealed Final Fantasy XVI as a PlayStation 5 exclusive in September of 2020, but since that initial announcement, the game has been mostly quiet. Square Enix finally broke its silence at the latest State of Play event, revealing a release window for Final Fantasy XVI, giving fans a closer look at the combat, and showing off some of the massive summons that will be featured in the game. The latest Final Fantasy XVI trailer reveals more about the game's world, story, and protagonist Clive Rosefield. Clive is put to the test against human enemies and monsters in the trailer, utilizing a variety of flashy attacks as he fights his enemies. It's the kind of over-the-top combat system that one expects from Square Enix nowadays, and it looks very impressive. The jury is still out on if it plays as good as it looks, but fans will find out when FF16 launches exclusively on PS5 in the summer of 2023. The trailer also gives Final Fantasy XVI's story some time in the spotlight and fleshes it out with more details, but perhaps the most interesting thing seen in the trailer are the massive summons, which are known as icons in Final Fantasy XVI. Final Fantasy XVI players will be able to use these icons in battle, which will include kaiju-style fights where these gargantuan beings go toe-to-toe with one another. The scale is something to behold, and likely only possible thanks to the added horsepower of the PlayStation 5. The Final Fantasy XVI summons highlighted in the trailer are each given epic send-offs at the end, set perfectly to the game's orchestral score. They are as follows, in order of appearance: Phoenix, Titan, Garuda, Rama, Shiva, Odin, Bahamut, and Ifrit. With the trailer, Square Enix also provided an update on Final Fantasy XVI's development. Square Enix has confirmed that Final Fantasy XVI is now playable from start to finish, meaning that it's nearing the end of its development. However, it was stressed that there is still a lot of polish that needs to be done before the game is ready for the masses, so Final Fantasy fans will want to hang tight for more information. While summoning has been an important part of the Final Fantasy series for ages, Final Fantasy XVI looks to place a heavier emphasis on the ability than in previous installations. As part of the basic premise of Final Fantasy XVI, humans, called dominants, have taken control of summoned beings and pit them against one another while vying for their faction's supremacy. As expected, placing summons as such a focal point of the plot means that nearly all the familiar summons from previous games should be expected to make an appearance. While as many as 8 are shown in the Final Fantasy XVI trailer, fans should expect to see Final Fantasy's most recurring summons like Leviathan, Carbuncle, Shada, and the like. For a title that places summoning at its center, having as few as 8 would put it at the lowest number of summons in a mainline game, tied with Final Fantasy III and Final Fantasy X. Bahamut stands as arguably the most iconic summon in Final Fantasy. Unlike the other summons that were clearly drawn from mythological sources, Bahamut is most likely a unique blend of the biblical stories and Dungeons and Dragons. Bahamut also holds the distinction of being the first summon in the franchise, first appearing in the original Final Fantasy game, though not as an actual summon spell. Oddly enough, along with Donald Duck, Bahamut is one of the few characters to use Zetaflare, one of the most powerful spells in Final Fantasy and its related titles. since Bahamut has always dealt heavy damage in each of his appearances, he has long been a fan-favorite summon. In contrast to Bahamut, Garuda is probably one of the lesser-known faces in the franchise, and one of the newest, first appearing in Final Fantasy XI. However, she has had many appearances in the latest Final Fantasy titles, and her prominence in the Final Fantasy XVI reveal trailer hints that Garuda could play a major role in the next game. Garuda is a classic example of a summon whose origins are easy to trace. She is clearly inspired by Garuda from Hindu mythology, a demigod with kite wings who is typically described as the king of the birds. In the Final Fantasy series, Garuda boasts the same bird-like qualities and appears as a goddess with the powers of wind. Ifrit is one of the most important summons in the Final Fantasy franchise, and its role in Final Fantasy XVI looks to be no different. While Ifrit is typically known as the first summon that players obtain, Final Fantasy XVI will present Ifrit as one of the main characters in the story. In Final Fantasy XVI, one of the nations, Rosaria, typically boasts an heir that is infused with fire abilities by the summon Phoenix. In the game, though, the eldest son of the Archduke of Rosaria, Clive, has been skipped over for his younger brother, Joshua, and instead of deriving his fire powers from Phoenix, instead turns to a darker source in Ifrit. Odin is another summon that may play a major role in Final Fantasy XVI. As their banner suggests, the Kingdom of Waylode will boast Odin as one of their icons, with the King of Waylode being Odin's dominant. Though he is unlikely to play as central a role as Ifrit, Odin has typically been a mainstay in the Final Fantasy franchise, appearing in nearly all the older titles. Like other summons, Odin's roots are easy to trace. He is inspired by the Norse god, Odin, and is always depicted as carrying Odin's spear, Gungnir, as well as riding atop his steed, Sleipnir. Although he is pulled from the Norse god, his appearance is typically that of a heavily armored knight, and his horse, Sleipnir, is usually depicted with either 4 or 6 legs, rather than 8 as it is depicted in mythology. A phoenix is a bird from Greek mythology that is typically associated with life and rebirth. In the Final Fantasy series, Phoenix is much the same. While Phoenix has typically been associated with Bahamut in past titles, Final Fantasy XVI looks to pit Phoenix directly against another fire-related summon, Ifrit. Due to Clive's facial markings, many fans have speculated that Phoenix will, at some point in the game, be responsible for reviving Clive at the behest of his brother, Joshua. Although, with Clive being the dominant for Ifrit, it's likely that the brothers will be fighting against one another in the present-day story. Rama takes on the appearance of an archetypal wizard with long white hair and a flowing beard. He wields lightning abilities and is known for his signature attack, Judgment Bolt, which is a powerful area of effect attack. While he is a relatively common figure in the series, he most recently appeared in the Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade Yuffie DLC as a boss encounter. Unlike the aforementioned summons, Rama has almost no clear mythological ties. His appearance is likely pulled from the Arthurian character Merlin, and his name could be loosely tied to the Hebrew word for thunder, which would fit with his abilities, but both ideas are merely fan theories. Shiva is right up there with Bahamut as one of the most iconic summons in the franchise. Shiva has evolved significantly from her origin in Final Fantasy III, but has consistently appeared as an ice-based summon. Like Rama's ability, Shiva's ability, Diamond Dust, is an area of effect attack but applies frost damage to enemies. It's been speculated that Jill could be Shiva's dominant in Final Fantasy XVI. She is the middle sibling between Clive and Joshua, and pairing her with an ice-based icon while her brothers are both paired with fire-based icon could make for an interesting angle. Titan is another character that has appeared in the franchise multiple times from Final Fantasy III to Final Fantasy XV, but has changed rather significantly. Titan has always stayed true to its Greek mythological roots and has always been a hulking humanoid figure that deals earth-based damage, but has slowly grown in size over the course of the franchise. In Final Fantasy XVI, Titan appears to be significantly larger than the other summons. The trailer also shows Titan pitted against Shiva, possibly suggesting a war between the Dalmekian Republic, which controls Titan, and Rosaria, which controls Shiva, Phoenix, and Ifrit. One of Final Fantasy XVI's most prominent promotional images shows a grown-up Clive with Phoenix and Ifrit converging on him in a manner similar to the game's logo. This in itself did not have any meaning, but Clive's left arm, which he seems to use for channeling icon magic, looked like a flaming spiked claw. Phoenix is the icon representing fire's warmth and life-giving properties, while Ifrit seems more in tune with a violent inferno. Although both icons are seen in the reveal trailer in a dark environment, Phoenix shines brighter and more colorfully than Ifrit, and its powers when used by Clive seem to summon one of its wings. Clive's arm in this art is dark and gnarled in a manner most similar to the more sinister Ifrit. Considering Clive's demeanor after the time skip, it makes sense that his vengeful personality would be associated with Ifrit's hellfire. However, the way the trailers have been shot thus far imply that Joshua, Phoenix's dominant, is killed in combat with a red-eyed Ifrit. There has been no indication of icons going out of their dominance control, although two inexperienced dominants could presumably be tricked into fighting. Of note is that the giant icon battle between Phoenix and Ifrit in the trailer shows that the player is in control of Phoenix, and thus Joshua by proxy. Having the player fight their usual avatar as part of a tutorial would be novel, but that's probably not what's happening here. The narration and camera cuts used at the end of FF16's second trailer are meant to obscure an even stranger happening in the story. At the end of the trailer, a shot of Clive cuts to a blue-eyed Ifrit charging forward and throwing a punch at another Ifrit. The shock some characters expressed in the first trailer at there being two icons of fire now seems trivial compared to the confusion over two of the same icon fighting each other. Never before in the Final Fantasy franchise have two of the same summon been invoked in a cutscene to fight one another. The Eons in Final Fantasy X are individually granted to every summoner that finds them, so the multiple summoner duels in that game are not without precedent. All of this new information just goes to show how little the fans actually know about Final Fantasy XVI. From what can be gathered from the second trailer's narration, there may be an alliance of dominants seeking power in Valisthea, and the current dominant of the Dark Icon Ifrit may have been charged with assassinating the current and future archdukes and destabilizing Rosaria. This person may succeed, but is waylaid by the surprise awakening of Clive as another dominant of Ifrit, who is somehow able to keep the blessing offered to him by Phoenix's dominant. How Clive is able to channel multiple icon powers at once is still unknown, but it will definitely help him in his quest to take revenge on this mysterious aggressor. Thus, the dual meaning behind the logo and Clive's aged-up render becomes clear. The early clash between Phoenix and Ifrit will have ramifications that ripple across the rest of Final Fantasy XVI. However, Phoenix and Ifrit also make up the core of Clive's abilities, and probably serve as his first two icons. Phoenix is with him from the prologue via Joshua's blessing, granting the ability to teleport, use fire magic, and employ various special techniques. Clive seemingly awakens as Ifrit's dominant shortly before the timeskip end, while an Ifrit moveset is never seen. It is the only other player-controlled icon shown fighting against summoned beasts. Clive may be reluctant to invoke Ifrit outside of emergencies due to both the political mire surrounding dominance and his own grudge against the beast. It appears that fans who were linking Clive and Ifrit were both right and wrong in the end. This raises a lot of questions about how summoning magic actually works in Final Fantasy XVI, as Clive using Ifrit against Ifrit after Phoenix has fallen breaks the presumed laws of the setting. With the Blight in the background and a worldwide war in the foreground, Final Fantasy XVI is shaping up to be the most complex mainline Final Fantasy in a while. At the same time, Clive is probably still dealing with regret that he couldn't stop the tragedy in his home, and that he has become what he hates. It will be a pleasure to learn more about Final Fantasy XVI's mysteries once it draws closer to its release. After PlayStation's State of Play, Square Enix released a selection of beautiful screenshots teasing Final Fantasy XVI's explorable landscapes. 8 different screenshots were shared via Square Enix's press hub for Final Fantasy XVI, seemingly without explanation. The screenshots are listed under the subheading Landscapes of FFXVI and most showcase a third-person perspective of Final Fantasy XVI protagonist Clive Rosefield in different locations. The screenshots provide a glimpse at the world waiting to be explored in Final Fantasy XVI beyond just the cinematic locations featured in the newest trailer. 4 screenshots stand out from the group overall. One of the screenshots features a fallen enemy before Clive, who still wields their gore-covered sword. This shows that fights are likely taking place in these open environments. The next 2 show Clive in civilization, with the first inside a city with a wagon and tall brick towers, and the second in some dark ruin and a platform surrounded by water. The fourth is particularly interesting, with Clive looking out at a massive city built into a towering mountain. These 4 screenshots show the potential scope of Final Fantasy XVI's world. The remaining 4 screenshots are environmental. 2 show Clive outdoors and 2 don't have Clive in them at all. The first 2 show Clive near a stream, the sunlight beaming through the branches of tall trees, and then in a foggy locale. The next 2 show a campfire in front of a watery, swampy locale and a rocky locale. These screenshots show the diversity of environments available to explore. All in all, these are still just 8 screenshots. Until these areas are shown in a Final Fantasy XVI gameplay video, it's unclear if they're fully explorable or just facades covering up much more restrictive paths through the game. In other words, there's still worries that Final Fantasy XVI could end up very linear, like Final Fantasy XIII. Final Fantasy has changed dramatically since the release of Final Fantasy X, as Square Enix shifts more toward action-based combat and away from fully explorable worlds. Fans each have their own preferences, but what matters is that Final Fantasy fans are informed regarding what direction Final Fantasy XVI has taken. What's clear so far is that Final Fantasy XVI is a darker JRPG, with Clive seeking revenge for something, although the particulars are a little murky right now. It ultimately seems to be Joshua's death, but if Joshua does die because he unleashed the Phoenix and Phoenix is fighting Ifrit, it would seem that Clive is the one responsible for Joshua's death. That's neither here nor there, though, but ultimately every gameplay glimpse shown so far puts Clive alone on the battlefield. Notably, the UI also seems to limit the possibility of a party system too. The selection of icons triangulates inward, leaving little room for companion health bars. It could be they are smaller, and it would make more sense to show Clive's level, as the game does, if it showed companion levels too. But from combat to moments of Clive walking alone in a city, through showcases from level 13 to 30+, it seems Clive is going against his fate in Final Fantasy XVI, absolutely alone. This was the best state of play that focused on multiple titles. The single-title state of plays are always fantastic, and this multi-title state of play really elevated the state of play branding. I hope we get a God of War Ragnarok state of play or a trailer with release date soon. And that's all for the video, guys. Like and share the video for a greater audience. Comment your thoughts on the topics, and donations are always appreciated. Subscribe to the channel and click the bell icon, and until then from SMPV, it's goodbye.
Awaken, child of fate. Awaken, if free.